Hello, my name is Cindy Richard. I'm the director and co-founder of Suicide Prevention of York. September is Suicide Prevention Month. Through weekly podcasts, we will be discussing with professionals not only how we can help survivors of suicide, but the professionals that helped the person through their mental health journey. In addition, how can we prevent suicide from happening in all York County communities? Our podcast series will include professionals in the fields of mental health, medical, education, older adults, and first responders. In addition, we will provide 2 podcasts on programs we are offering to school districts throughout York County to help prevent suicide, Avidum and Hope Squad. Thank you for coming today. Today I have the medical team, nurses from Tower 3. Katie Howard is a nurse manager at Tower 3 at York Hospital, and Kristen
Murphy
is a nurse at Tower 3 at York Hospital. Take time to introduce yourself to the audience if you'd like.
I'm Katie. I am one of the nurse managers on Tower 3. Pretty big unit, very big, amazing team. I've been there for 16 years.
Wow.
And wouldn't imagine doing anything else.
That's great. Kristen.
And I'm Kristen. I've been on Tower 3 for 5 years now and just love being a nurse, so I'm so glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad you guys could be here too, because I know you're very, very busy, especially right now. As nurses, though, one of the reasons you're here is because you have lost colleagues and patients to suicide. Tell us how you were able to come back to work and help others while you're grieving.
So I think, it can be really difficult. We definitely treat patients that are dealing with suicidal thoughts. And so that's one thing, or we see suicide attempts. So we're just really seeing people who are in the thick of that struggle. But we've also just had losses among our own work family, and that's been a different kind of struggle. And so I think, our work family's been really great about kind of assessing each situation personally and like what that person really needs to heal and recover and, be restored to being the best nurse or best worker that they can be. So I think it's been a really like individualized process.
Depending on who you've lost, probably, too, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, she's completely right. And everyone that's been affected on our team has kind of grieved in their own way. So the team around them, we've kind of learned to adapt and how to support each other. I think when you go back and you have a family like we do, a work family, kind of remember why you became a nurse. I mean, being a nurse isn't just a job. It's a calling, it's a purpose. And I think getting back to work and being around that family just really, it's where we need to be. It makes it kind of keeps us grounded, keeps us together. We grieve together.
Yeah.
As a family would.
Yeah.
I know I've been called up there to work with some of the nurses, and after a suicide of a colleague or a family member. What kinds of things do you all offer when you know someone is grieving? What kinds of things do you all do that is maybe a little different from your daily routine that you would have up there?
I think, and I'll just be transparent, just to make this a little more personal, but I lost my sister to suicide back in March, and so I can really share from a very personal place. And so coming back to work, and I know this is true for my coworkers as well, again, there's just been that like individual assessment of what you need. So people have just even come up and been like, I don't know what to say. And that's probably one of the most helpful things that people said. Instead of trying to like find the right words, people have just been like, I don't know what to say, but I'm here. And that's just been really meaningful. Or people have been like, do you want me to say anything, or do you want me to just like be over here if you need something? And I think, people have just navigated that beautifully and really have been sensitive to allowing me personally to share what would be helpful and what wouldn't. And I've seen them do that for others as well.
And that's true. It's people care but they don't know what to say, and they don't know the language to use. And the language is extremely important when you're grieving. The person that, Heidi Bryant, who started us here in New York, she's written a whole book on what people say after a suicide. Some of it's pretty sad, because why would you say something like that? But people care, and they just don't know what to say. So sometimes not saying anything or saying what they said to you is perfect.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's perfect.
Absolutely. You don't need a ton of feedback, in those early moments especially. And for me, I've always loved being a nurse, so to me it's always about restoring that person who's grieving to who they really are. So not what they've been through, not what they've seen, not what they've lost, but like, who are you apart from that? And just really kind of building up resilience again, because I think unfortunately we live in a culture that really doesn't value being resilient.
No.
And so you can really, like, if you take on that perspective, anything that's thrown at you in this life can really be turned into an opportunity to rise up and demonstrate resilience. And then that's contagious. So then you really have that to offer to someone else. So
Yeah, because I'm sure in your all's world, at the hospital, you deal with death a lot. And even having a patient that might be extra special, that's a type of grief you have to go through also, I like what you said about the resilience piece of it, because suicide affects everybody, and nobody's discriminated against when it comes to suicide. It can happen to anybody. And so you don't know when that resiliency that you've just learned through someone else may help you too later on down the line.
Absolutely. And suicide kind of has this like universal cry, because there's something about it that no matter what you believe or where you come from or what your foundation is, I think we all as humans agree it's just unnatural.
Yeah.
It's not the way that someone's meant to leave this world. So again, like regardless of what your belief system is, we all kind of cry out together when this happens. And that can really be turned into a beautiful thing, because really we're all in agreement this wasn't supposed to happen. And so I find that can be really comforting to people. Like this just it doesn't feel natural, This isn't right. There's something that really doesn't sit right with people about it.
That's one thing we say to people that come to our support groups that have lost someone to suicide. We wish you didn't have to join this club. We wish that you weren't here tonight. But we welcome you, but we wish you didn't have to. And it is, it's especially if they had no clue that it was going to happen. And that's been happening a lot, where there hasn't, either they didn't know the signs or the person just didn't show the signs. And we know in the medical field, as we do in the mental health field, those signs can be covered up very, very easily, because too many people know the signs, in the medical and the mental health fields. So if they really do want to take their life, that's one of the things they're going to do, is cover it up in some way, so that nobody stops them. But yeah, it's very well said. You have anything you want to add to that?
She's hard to follow. Goodness. She's just so well spoken and passionate. Your question was about what we offer.
Yes.
So and she's correct in the way that people kind of deal with it very differently. And in my role, it was just, I don't always know what to say either, but I always make sure I say, I'm here, whatever you need, just let me know, we will make it happen. If you need 1 week off, whatever you want to do. Somebody wanted to come back very quickly after. I'm like, are you sure?
Yeah.
And we still have somebody off. It's been off for months and months and months. Everybody copes differently, but our role is just be understanding, and we'll support them however we can. And I know we've used you in the past, and I've certainly given out your number in the support services to more than one person this year. So,
yes, unfortunately, that has worked out that way, and our support groups are helpful to some at different times. Again, I think sometimes it has to do with who have you lost. and how soon do you come back to work. I find that if you've lost a child to suicide, that it takes a lot longer to get back into, the work life, and maybe it doesn't even happen. Depends on what your profession was, too. Teachers have a harder time after a loss of a child to go back to work, or if you lost a spouse, or, whoever you have lost, it's still important that you grieve. And going back to work seems to be one of the toughest things a person can do after a suicide, because they don't want the limelight on them. They want to go back. They want to have space where they can leave if they want, and cry. Just go outside for a breather if they want to. They don't want to answer all the questions, but they want people to know that they're hurting too. So it's kind of two-sided. They want the support, and they want people to know that they're hurting. So I think the way you all have described it is really good. Prevention services within the medical field are becoming more and more popular too. And I think all levels of medical, anybody on the medical team, from doctors to the janitor or whatever, needs to be educated in suicide prevention. How much education did you all get during your nursing program when it came to suicide ideation? I got nothing when I was getting
don't think
mine.
that it's heavily focused on at all. You're taught to do these little screening tools, maybe. Fortunately, I had the experience of working in an inpatient psych unit for a year, so that was really beneficial.
Okay.
But then again, you're seeing a really specific portion of the population that struggles. There's certainly people that don't come inpatient, and they still struggle in different ways. And so I'm grateful for that experience, but it's really not a big part of our training and education. It should be. But really, I think even more so, I don't mean to cut you off, but I think even more so is really just teaching people to study other people. And so, it goes even beyond just scaling someone for suicidal tendencies, but how can I look at a patient or a coworker and know how they're doing? So how can I begin to study the humans around me and know what's going on for them? Or how can I tell they're different today than they were yesterday? And can I lean into that? Can I have the courage to kind of press into that, instead of just oh, they seem off, and just carrying on? Because it's in that second where we're brave and we approach someone and, tell them that we notice they're different. That's really important.
Well, as nurses, you have to know what questions to ask. Just like doctors, they have to know what questions to ask. And if you don't ask the questions, you're not going to get the answers usually.
And I think one of the challenges I find with being a nurse and kind of it's just kind of making these questions, they can be made to feel a little impersonal. So when I have to check off a screening tool and I have to go in and say, do you feel like killing yourself? I really like to have some rapport with the patient first.
Yes.
And so again, it's just shaping nurses. Yes, we're given these tools, but the tool is not the intervention in itself. You really have to take the time to invest in that person and establish rapport and let them know that you truly care about who they are, and you're going to get a better answer also.
Build that trust.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's just like going to the doctor. If you don't like the way the doctor's acting, you're not going to give them the information that you want. But if you really see that the doctor's responding to you and seems like he could get into a dialogue with you and get to know you, and really seems to want to get to know you, he's not looking at his watch all the time for that 15 minutes to be up, you're going to feel a lot more comfortable in opening up. And we provide a whole workshop on that, on question, persuade, and refer. It's a whole certification program that you can get, and it's just a gatekeeper program for anybody that is around people, and that's everybody, to understand. First of all, you have to build that trust. You have to build that rapport with them, and once you do, how do you ask the question? And nobody wants to ask that question because nobody wants to hear, yes, I am, because then you have to wait. But you have to ask the question. It teaches you what words to say and how to ask it, and then persuade them to get help, and then eventually refer them. But it doesn't end there. You have to stop. And once they're out of the hospital, or even while they're in the hospital, visit them. So I think you're right, but and getting that rapport first is really, really important, because you're not going to tell somebody just off the street, that you're, or just a nurse that happens to come into your room, how you're feeling. It's really important to get to know the person. I'm glad you said that. Anything you want to add to that?
I echo, we really didn't have a whole lot of that in nursing school, I don't think. It was one semester, and do you really touch on the suicidal ideation part of that? You really don't, and it doesn't come up often. But it's almost being brave enough to ask the question and brave enough to approach that topic, and that's very difficult to teach, I'm sure. So.
Have you all gone through any kind of training for assessing a client with possible suicide ideation? No?
Just when I worked in psychiatry, we did trainings on the unit. But again, it's really just kind of pushing that question, and that is important. So don't mishear me. It is so important to come out and ask those questions, like, are you feeling this way? But I think, again, it's figuring out how to land there.
It's listening.
That shouldn't be your takeoff point.
Yeah.
That should be where you land in the conversation.
It's what I've been through the QPR assessment certification program with QPR Institute, and the one thing I have gotten out of that is, how well do you listen? And our Hope Squad stuff and VITAM is all about listening and seeing a person. You can get a lot from that without using words. You can listen to the words they choose to use. You can see their body language. You can see their eyes. And I kind of push the assessment piece. I hope nobody's listening to this, but I push the assessment piece aside because I know what's on there. I know what I have to look for, because you can't listen if you're doing the checks marks on the paper. You're too busy getting down to the bottom. So you have to just sit back and listen. And that's what people who die by suicide just want, somebody to listen to them. And they just want somebody to hear what they're saying. And maybe they don't know how to say it. That's what they need. They need somebody to listen. So listening skills are really, really important. And I think that's what you're trying to say too, is that, it's not always what you have to say. It's what you hear and see. And that's part of the training of working in the schools too now, is getting kids, all these peer-to-peer programs, is getting kids to see each other and be able to, because a child or anybody that's even in a workforce, if somebody is kicking the can every day and nobody notices, then that's not good. When you all first started talking, you started talking about the whole group as a family. And you would notice that in your family. I think if somebody wanted you to see it, wanted you to notice it too. So, but it doesn't always work, People die by suicide after they've done, people in the family and people around them have done everything they possibly can for them. And you can't blame yourself for things you didn't know, and you can't blame yourself for not trying, because you've tried, and you've tried to give them the help. Sometimes it just doesn't work out well. So that leads to our next question. Any suggestions on how the medical profession can help prevent suicide?
I find that access is a little challenging, I think, to behavioral health appointments.
Very.
And I don't know what the answer is to that, but I've been hearing that from people trying to get help for over a decade. I don't know what the answer is, but I have heard that Wellspan has put in a behavioral health specialist of some kind into some primary care offices, at least one day a week, maybe more at some.
I heard they were going to start that.
Yeah, because one of the problems that comes up in PCP visits, mental health comes along with it a lot.
Mhm.
So I think that's a good start too.
That is a good start. And I hear it's 6 months wait for anybody to get in to see a psychologist or a therapist. I get a lot of clients that come to me just in the interim until they can find somebody, so at least they have a counselor to talk to. But it is, and it's not just York County, it's everywhere. I don't know what the answer is either. I wish I did, but I know some psychologists here in York County, and they're booked for the next 3 or 4 months. So it is difficult.
Yeah, and I think it's not even just having the services available, but good services.
Exactly.
So it's like we can link someone with some kind of support or service, but it really needs to be something that's all-encompassing and is going to provide follow-up and is really going to provide an accurate assessment of where that person is. Mm-hmm. So, I think there's a lot of cracks in the system, but it's also not just the job of the system to intervene. Like we said, we call our work family a family, and it really just comes back to people noticing people. Mm-hmm. And so, we can see someone who's struggling and say, oh, I wish there were more services, but also just kind of building ourselves up and encouraging others to really step into that role just as people. So, and not that we're out there being heroic or trying to be everything for someone, but just remembering that the littlest thing can really make a difference for someone.
Yeah.
The smallest act of kindness. People love to be noticed, and it sounds messed up, but it's so true. People love to be noticed, and they love it when you notice they're struggling. And yes. I don't mean they get pleasure out of that. I mean like they love it deep inside.
Well, that's what they want.
It feels loving.
Yeah.
And so when we just say to someone I know you're busy, but I noticed that you don't look the same today, or I noticed something's off about you, or I noticed you're struggling. I just want you to know I see you. I mean, you just don't know the profound impact that could have on somebody's day. You don't know if they just cried out in the bathroom, does anybody see me? Does anybody notice? And then you speak that. So you just can't devalue the little things. And so
a smile can go a long way.
Oh, it's so true. It sounds cliche, but you just don't know.
Yeah. A smile, a hello. Mm-hmm. And people would say, well, with a mask on, you can't really tell. Yeah, you can. Mm-hmm. People smile with their eyes, too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, if you go, you may be not having a really good day, but somebody else is having a worse one. So when you go to the grocery store, which seems to be the place where a lot of people are grouchy, just say hello to someone or smile, or do you need help with your groceries or something like that, when you never know.
Yeah, and really that's the place where resilience is built. Mm-hmm. And so I just feel like as a nurse and as a person, we really need to train, equip one another. On your worst day, that's actually the best time to be there for someone else. And I'm not talking about neglecting yourself, but using that as an opportunity to overcome. And so when you come into work and it's just the worst day, look for the opportunity to just lift someone else up a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I think unfortunately we're kind of taught that can be negative, you shouldn't give to someone else if your cup's not full. And we kind of say all these things, but I really disagree with all that. I think that little opportunity to lift someone else is actually going to lift you too. And so there's just beauty in that and being there for one another.
Well, it's called connectivity. When you're connecting, they have done many studies on people that suffer from depression, suffer from all kinds of mental health issues. I don't like to use the word illness because it's an issue. It's, because we don't define ourselves by our mental health.
That's right.
And we shouldn't. And so I tell people a lot of times, and a lot of people have told me too, that when I feel this way, I need to be around people. And a lot of these people aren't people. They don't want to be around a lot of people. But they find that their attitude and their whole body changes as soon as they're connecting with someone. And this is what they missed during COVID. Mm-hmm. People realized, I think, how much they needed people during COVID, that connectivity. And there's been a lot of studies done in suicide prevention with connectivity. In fact, Hope Squad and Avidum are both programs that are based on connectivity. So I think, like you said, when someone sees you, and yeah, they may be struggling too, but they see me amongst their struggles, you know. And, you know, going back to the beginning of all this is when you lose a colleague or when you lose a patient to suicide, you're not struggling by yourself. You're there with everybody else, you know. Everybody has a different way of grieving, and everybody should be able to grieve the way they feel they should grieve. But the bottom line is we're all grieving, you know, over the loss. So it is harder sometimes, I think, to pick other people up when you're grieving. But like you said, sometimes in our worst days, reaching out and helping somebody else can help us too.
Absolutely.
You know, it's a beautiful thought. Yeah. So, anything you all would like to say to our listeners that may be struggling right now or possibly contemplating suicide?
Absolutely. So I mean, if you're struggling, I would say, first of all, you're not alone, and you're never alone. There's people who've been there, who've felt that kind of despair, and who've been able to come out of that place. And also just, you have so much purpose and value, and that gets hidden when you're struggling. It's almost like you become blinded to things that are really going on, and it's really just such a distortion of reality. And when you can even just acknowledge that for a second, like, this is not reality. There's something more here for me. And just have hope that you can come out of that place, and there's just something better for you. Absolutely.
Nicely said. Anything you would like to say, Katie?
She is absolutely correct. I mean, what we did to support each other, the motto is stay, tomorrow needs you. So we need you here, your family, your friends. Talk to somebody. Somebody's always willing to listen. So.
What about the new person on the block that's just happened to be new at your on your floor, and they don't know anybody there? What if they start struggling? How would you help them?
So again, I think it's taking that time to really let that person know they're seen. So like, just trying not to let them trickle into the crowd and just kind of hide behind the scenes, but really let them know they're seen, you're there. And that, you know, we really, like, just really caring for each other as people. Like, you're not just another worker here. We're not just doing a job. Especially at our place of employment, it's the business of people. And so because of that, you know, where we're at individually also really matters, because we're in the business of people. So, again, just taking that time to get to know them, let them know you're there, you see them, do they need anything, and then as you get to know them, you can pick up on those subtle cues or let them know you're there.
And grieving doesn't come with a time frame. And if you've lost someone to suicide, that has changed your life forever. And yes, you learn from it, you grow, you learn to, you get a whole nother toolbox, basically, when it comes to grieving. And you know how to put it on the shelf. And every once in a while, triggers happen, whether you've lost someone after losing maybe a family member, and then losing someone at the hospital, there's going to be triggers. We talk about that a lot in our support groups. But you have the tools to work through it and to deal with it. And yes, you're going to have those days. You're going to have those bad days. And they may come up and bite you in the butt when you're least expecting it. But, you know, you have the tools to handle it and to work through them.
And I think letting someone know your triggers can be really helpful. Like, I know when I came back, there was a certain time on the clock. because when we lost my sister, it was while I was at work. And so there was just like a certain time that I would be like, oh no, you know, it would just be a huge trigger. And so one day I just let somebody know that this time it's just, I need a few minutes.
Yeah.
And so you do have to kind of speak some of that stuff into the light, because the more we kind of pull away and try to handle everything ourselves, it just kind of becomes dark.
Mhm.
So the more we kind of put out there, I think. can
And
be
I think
helpful.
in the helping professions,
Mhm.
which is one of the reasons we're doing this, is because people think we can handle it all ourselves.
Right.
And we know what to do, so people don't see us, you know? And I think that's really important, that we're humans.
Yeah.
And we have feelings just like anybody else in any other field would. And just because we're in the helping profession doesn't mean we have all the answers, especially when it comes to ourselves. So, so I think that's really, really important. And, you know, we want to be able to help others.
Mhm.
And so in order to help others, we have to be strong too, and we have to have a clear mind. So if you can't go to work and have that mindset that you're going to be able to get through the shift, somebody else needs to understand that and know when you need those breaks.
Right.
But I never really thought about having that time, the time on the clock that comes up. It's usually the day.
Mhm.
Or the date on a calendar, but the time on the clock would be if you were at work and it happened at work.
Mhm.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you for sharing
Yeah,
that.
of course.
Any closing remarks?
No, I think this has been a great opportunity to share, both personally and professionally, just how suicide can touch us all differently, and truly, like, everybody grieves differently and needs different things, and it's just so personal to each of us, and just has such a big impact. So, you know, I think as we just lean in and pay attention to each other, there's a lot of healing that can come from that place.
I think so. And we sometimes don't know what that other person has gone through.
That's right.
It's amazing how many survivors we have in York County that don't talk about it at all. When you've lost, you know, anywhere from 60 to almost 100 people a year to suicide, and each one of them has maybe 60 people under their belt, you know, that are friends or families too, and are survivors. That adds up after a while. So there's not very many people in York County that have not been touched by suicide. I can almost say that. So you don't know. And they may not have been a direct family member or a colleague, but they may have been a friend that has died by suicide. Any other closing remarks? Katie, anything you'd like to say?
I'm lucky to have Kristen. So, such an amazing nurse to have on our team. But yeah, I think I'm hopeful about these programs that we're bringing into schools. I think that's a really great thing to have here. I think we need to teach the kids how to communicate with each other and be understanding, and learn how to be observant of the kids that are around them, and be nice to each other and lift each other up, and that excites me. So I hope that continues to expand. But yeah, just ask what somebody else needs. You know, everybody's different. And
Yeah, put other people's needs before your own.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you both for being a part of our suicide prevention discussion this month. If you or someone you know needs help, please call us at 717-451-6411 or the National Hotline number, 1-800-273-8255. You're important, so please reach out to someone you can talk to. For more suicide prevention services, call Suicide Prevention of York at 717-451-6411. Thank you.